Let's do some meditation on the breathing, the breath. Is there anyone who hasn't done meditation before? Who's new, beginner? Yeah? Okay. So I'll give some basic instructions for those who are new. And even those who aren't new, it doesn't hurt to hear the instructions again. So when we meditate, it's mainly our mind that is meditating, but mind and body are connected. So the way we sit, what we do with our body, will have an effect on our mind. And so the recommended way of sitting when we meditate is to keep the back straight. And if you're sitting cross-legged on the floor, have your legs crossed in a way that's comfortable for you so that you don't have to move a lot during the meditation. And if you're sitting on a chair, then have your 2 feet flat on the floor. And we usually put our hands like this in our lap, with the left on the bottom, right on the top. And the fingers are sort of lined up on top of each other. Then the 2 thumbs touching each other. So this has to do with the flow of energy in the body to be most conducive for meditation. And let your shoulders relax. Don't have them tight, but let them drop and be relaxed. And have your mouth and jaw relaxed, not clenching your teeth. And it's good to put the tip of the tongue on the roof of the mouth, behind the upper teeth. That way you don't have to swallow so much during meditation. And the head and chin are tilted downwards a little bit. Not held up too high nor too low, but just slightly down. And then for the eyes, it's recommended that we don't close them all the way, because if we do that, we can become sleepy. And we do want to stay awake when we meditate. And so to prevent sleepiness, it's good to have the eyes open a little bit and looking down onto your lap or the floor in front of you. If that's very difficult and uncomfortable, it is okay to close your eyes. But if you do that, just try to notice if you're starting to fall asleep. And if you are, you can open your eyes to help yourself stay awake. So try to sit in that way. But it's also important to be relaxed and comfortable, not tense. So if you notice there's tension anywhere in the body, see if you can let go of the tension. You can imagine that it kind of melts and then flows out of you, goes into the earth below. And let the breathing be natural. So try not to control your breathing, because you don't really need to do that. Your body knows how to breathe. Just let the body breathe in a natural way. Sometimes the breath might be longer, sometimes shorter, and that's okay, that's natural. Now with your mind, your attention, be aware of the breathing as it's coming in and going out. And you can do that in whatever way you're able to notice the breath, feel the breath. So it might be at the nostrils, where the breath is coming in and going out of the body. Or it might be your abdomen, which is moving in and out with each breath. But you can choose wherever or however you're able to feel the breath coming in and going out. Put your awareness there at that place. And the important thing is to continue paying attention to the breath, one breath after another. But that's not easy to do, because our mind has the habit of wandering and thinking about lots of different things, sometimes things from the past or the future, or our problems, our relationships. Many different thoughts come into our mind, and we tend to follow the thoughts and get caught up in them, thinking those thoughts. So when we're doing this meditation on the breath, we need to avoid that. Avoid thinking about other things. And instead, just keep watching the breath coming in and going out. So that's the object of the meditation. And when our mind is on the breath, being aware of the breath, then that means mindfulness is present. Mindfulness, remembering our object, remembering the breath. And when our mind loses the breath and starts thinking about something else, getting caught up in thoughts, or paying attention to sounds outside, whatever, anything other than the breath, that means we've lost mindfulness. Mindfulness has stopped. for that time. But when we notice our mind has wandered away from the breath, we bring it back to the breath, then that is renewing mindfulness. So see if you can practice that. We'll do that for about 10 minutes. Again, stay with the breath as much as possible and bring your attention back to the breath when it wanders away. And one thing that can help with this practice is to counting the breaths. So if you can do this if you want, you don't have to, it's optional. But one way of counting the breaths is to count each whole breath as one. So breathing in, breathing out, 1. Breathing in, breathing out, 2. And so on. Keep counting. If you're new to meditation, just count up to 5 breaths. And then go back to 1. Start again at 1. If you've got more experience, you can count up to 10. And then go back to 1. So you count in rounds of either 5 breaths or 10 breaths. So doing that can help you to keep your attention on your breathing and know whether you're paying attention to the breath or doing something else. So let's try that for about 10 minutes. So the advice is that when we start off a practice of meditation, we do short sessions, even 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And then as you get more experience, then you can increase the length of time, and 15, 20, 30, and so on, gradually increase. And another thing that is mentioned in the instructions on meditation is it's completely normal that we have difficulty concentrating, and we may feel bombarded by thoughts, like Russian drones bombarding Ukraine. And they say some people even think that they have more thoughts when they practice meditation than they do at other times. Have you ever had that idea? But this is actually not true. Our mind is always busy thinking. There's lots and lots of different thoughts. But at the times when we're not meditating, we don't notice our thoughts so much because our attention is more out there. We're paying attention to things going on around us, and our phone, who's calling us, what WhatsApp messages are there, what's the news, and so on. So when our attention is going outside to other people and other things, then we're not paying so much attention inside, what's happening in our own mind. But there are thoughts going on. We just don't notice them. But when we practice meditation, we close our eyes, we sit still, we turn our phone off. We're not engaged so much with the outer world. And instead, we're doing something more internal, you know, like focusing on the breath or contemplating something. And so because we're more aware of our own mind, then we notice lots and lots of thoughts, all those thoughts, but they've always been there. So it's not that they just start happening when we're meditating. They're there all the time and we just don't notice them so much. Does that make sense? So that might be comforting in case you think that, oh, when I meditate, my mind just goes crazy. So many thoughts. And that's like not normal, but it is normal. So meditation helps us to become more aware of our mind and our thoughts. And according to Buddhism, we need to be aware of our mind and our thoughts. We need to notice what is happening in our mind, because many of our thoughts are related to afflictions, you know, afflictive mental states like attachment, anger, jealousy, self-centeredness. And those are the cause of our suffering, cause of our problems. And if we don't notice them, if they're there running around in our mind and influencing our thoughts, influencing our actions, our speech, our behavior, then we're creating more causes of suffering. Our suffering is just continuing, perpetuating, rather than coming to an end. And so we need to recognize those afflictive states of mind so that we can do something about them. We can take care of them. We can apply antidotes, remedies, so that we have less of those afflictive thoughts. And by increasing positive thoughts, like trying to have more good thoughts, like compassion and kindness and wisdom, patience, altruism. So lots of good positive thoughts we can cultivate. So the idea is to work on our mind so we have more good thoughts, less negative thoughts. And it takes time. It's not magic, instant. But gradually over time, then we'll be happier. Having more good thoughts and fewer negative thoughts. Our mind will just be healthier and happier, more peaceful. And also our relationships with other people and our way of living our life, all of these things will go better. So we'll experience benefit just here and now by working on our mind. But to be able to do that kind of work on the mind, we need to know our mind. We need to know ourselves. And so meditation helps us to do that. Are there any questions so far? I've been talking quite a lot, giving a lot of information. I see one in the back. I don't know, do you have a microphone, like for the people online? Do they?
There's one question as well. There is one question.
No, I'm wondering, does he need to talk into a microphone so the online people can hear? You will translate. Okay. Okay. So
actually, I can do the English, if you like. Well, go ahead. So meditating on the breath, as we've just done, would you say we're trying to do something, or we're trying to let something happen?
Well, there's different reasons for doing meditation on the breath. One would be to develop concentration, like to train our mind to have more concentration instead of being all over the place, yeah, distracted to every thought. That's one benefit of, or reason or purpose for meditating on the breath. Another is mindfulness, which I'm going to be explaining as we go on. I'm going to start talking about the 4 establishments of mindfulness. The first of the 4 is related to our body, mindfulness related to our body, and you start with the breath. So that's how the Buddha taught that mindfulness. He said, you know, find a quiet place, sit down, and then put your attention on your breathing and just be aware of your breathing. So you start from there, and then it progresses to more kind of more complex aspects of the practice to cultivate mindfulness. So there isn't an easy single answer to that question. It kind of depends on, yeah, what kind of practice you're doing. Also, what is your aim or goal for doing the practice? So I think a lot of people nowadays are doing mindfulness meditation on the breath, and maybe their reason is relaxed. Yeah, it can help you to relax. So there's research showing that, yeah, brain changes, your body changes, it can be good for your health. Also, people who are suffering from different problems like pain, sickness, depression, eating disorders, they're finding that, yeah, mindfulness practice can help with a lot of different kinds of problems. So some people might be doing this practice in order to deal with those problems. Also, sleeping disorders, having trouble going to sleep. So mindfulness of the breath can be used for that. So it's like multi-purpose. It depends on each person and what is their goal, what is their aim, what is the reason for doing the practice. Whether they're doing it just, you know, to be healthier now, you know, take care of problems now, or if they're doing it as part of a spiritual practice, you know, like in Buddhism or in other spiritual traditions. I've even heard of some Catholic nuns and priests who learn Buddhist meditation, practice it, teach it as part of the Catholic way of life. So maybe it's to become closer to God. I don't know. It's a multi-purpose. Yeah, so you can kind of decide for yourself what purpose you have for doing it. But so far we're just, you know, trying to stay on the breath and not let the mind go all over the place. So that's kind of like the basic practice, the first step in the practice. Any other questions?
Simple question. Is there a Tibetan Buddhism ancient word for mindfulness?
Is there a what?
Like a Tibetan Buddhist ancient word for mindfulness?
Ancient word?
Yeah, for mindfulness. Is that what is it?
Drenpa.
Sorry?
Drenpa.
Drenpa?
Drenpa. I mean, my pronunciation isn't great, so do you know Tibetan?
No, but because you talked about dukkha before,
Uh-huh.
and then I was wondering if mindfulness had a word also.
Oh, yeah, in Tibetan it's Drenpa, but in, you know, probably more people are familiar with Pali and Sanskrit. So in Pali, that's the language used in Southeast Asia, it's sati. And then in Sanskrit, I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's spelled SMRTI. smrti, something like that. Smrti. I haven't studied Sanskrit, so. But yeah, those are the terms for mindfulness and some of the languages Buddhist scriptures are preserved in.
And is there that you mentioned that in Buddhism it's important to know our minds? Why? Is it important to do something later? Or?
Big question. Well, the mind is more important than the body for different reasons. Ordinary people, they spend a lot of time dealing with the body, right? Taking care of our body, feeding our body, cleaning our body, making our body beautiful, healthy. So for ordinary people, a lot of time is spent taking care of our body. And of course our body is important. We need to keep it healthy and, try to live as long as we can. But mind is more important than our body because, for one thing, according to Buddhism, our body, the maximum amount of time it will last is about 100 years. Maybe a little more, maybe less, but, it's a limited amount of time. Whereas our mind is something that continues after we die. It doesn't stop when we die. That's hard for many people to believe, but this is the Buddhist view. So our mind will continue to exist after we die, and it takes another life, another birth. So that's one reason it's more important to take care of our mind. But the main reason it's important to pay attention to the mind is because our mind is the main cause or the main source of our happiness and our suffering. Whether we are happy or we are unhappy, it mainly depends on our mind. Yeah, and I think in the West, in Western science and medicine and so on, they're starting to realize that. Well, they've been, I think, for a few decades now, they've been realizing the importance of the mind. There's a lot of sickness, a lot of illness is related to mental states, like stress, right? If we are stressed, that will affect our health. And stress is something in the mind, yeah? Like too much worry, too much anxiety, too much desire and not getting what we desire. There's lots of causes of stress, but it's in the mind. Also anger. I've heard research that anger has very harmful effects on the body. Heart disease, blood pressure, high blood pressure, even cancer, other kinds of illnesses can occur if someone is really angry a lot and doesn't deal with their anger. So those are just a few examples. But yeah, this mind-body connection is being studied, researched in the West, and they are finding that, yeah, what's going on in our mind will affect our body and our health. And we can see this also in our own life. We can find examples of this in our own experience. Like, for example, if you're in a traffic jams. This is a common experience people have if you drive. Sometimes you're in a traffic jam. And people, I don't know about here in Spain, but in America, people can get really upset in traffic jams and even violent. There's cases of people getting a gun and starting to shoot other people. Like if they're trying to cut in front of them, they'll shoot that person. So they call it road rage, like road rage. Yeah, getting angry about traffic. And so that's coming from being extremely unhappy, being in a traffic jam and not knowing how to manage your mind, and then your mind gets unhappy and upset and angry, and it can even grow into violence and aggression, doing something horrible like murder. Whereas other people, when they're in a traffic jam, don't react that way. They're able to stay calm, patient, and if the person is a meditator, then they can use that time to do some meditation. Like, of course, you have to keep your eyes open and aware of what's going on around you, but you can be paying attention to your breath, or you can be reciting some prayers or mantras, or you can have a podcast on or audiobook, right? And be listening to the Dalai Lama giving a teaching, or some audiobook, that's very soothing for your mind and very uplifting for your mind. So there are things you can do while you're in your car in a traffic jam where you can keep your mind calm and peaceful and positive. So there's two very different experiences. The people are in the same situation, but the way they experience it is very, very different. And the outcome, the result of what they're doing was also very different. The person who, the extreme example of road rage and committing a murder, that person's going to spend the rest of their life in prison, probably. Totally destroyed their life. The person who can use that time well and part of their spiritual practice, then they can learn something from that. They can grow from that. They can benefit from that. And so this is not related to the external situation, because both of them they're stuck in this traffic jam, but the way they're dealing with it, what's going on in their mind is different, and that's why they have different experiences. Okay, so that's just one example, one illustration of how important the mind is. It plays the major role in our happiness, also our health, just for here and now, but then in a more long-term sense, what we will experience in the future, this life, future lives, if you can believe that, it mainly depends on our mind. And so we need to know our mind. We need to be able to recognize those states of mind that are conducive for happiness and health and good experiences now and in the future. So we cultivate those, have more of those, and then we need to recognize those states of mind that bring suffering, both now and in the future. And then we work on decreasing those, overcoming those. So in Buddhism, mind is really, really important, more important than our body. So the Dalai Lama sometimes talks about mental hygiene. He says, we know a lot about physical hygiene, taking care of our body and keeping our body clean and healthy, brushing our teeth, taking a shower, washing our hands, all those things. We know a lot about that. But we need to learn mental hygiene. This is one area that we're lacking, mental hygiene. How to keep our mind clean and healthy. That makes sense?
Can I ask one more question?
Mm-hmm.
So, as you said, the mental state affects on your body or can affect it. But be aware of that can also create some stress, because in my case, for example, if I am aware that, I'm suffering, or I am angry, or this mental state, sometimes then I suffer. How can that affect my body? So if you have any
So what you're
for that or point of view.
So what you're saying is when you become aware of some like negative state of mind, then you have additional suffering about that. Yeah.
Knowing that that can affect your body as well.
Yeah.
You know, like,
yeah.
I know I'm angry. Oh, if I am angry during 1 week, that can affect my body as well.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, I don't know, ache on the digestion or whatever. So then you suffer more.
Well, you have to, yeah, I can understand what you're saying. I can very well understand because when I first started learning Buddhism, I was in India, Dharamsala, listening to teachings from lamas. And when I heard all this teaching about the mind and the negative aspects of the mind, what are called the delusions or mental afflictions, I don't know what you call them in Spanish, but yeah, things like anger, attachment, all these things, I got very upset because I saw them in myself, and so then I felt, wow, I'm such a bad person. I'm such a horrible person, and I really have to change myself quickly. So I kind of got very stressed about that, and it took me a while. In fact, it took me a few years to learn to be more balanced about that. So I can share with you what was helpful for me. So one is that the Tibetan lamas say this. They say that it takes time to change our mind. We can't do it like that. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to immediately, right away, get rid of my anger, get rid of my attachment. I wanted to do it really, really fast. And so the lamas say, yeah, it's good to have the wish to be free of these negative states of mind, but it takes time. You can't do it like that. And so you need to be patient. You need to practice, with patience, and not try to push yourself. So I think a lot of people in the West have that kind of problem because, we tend to, I don't know, partly it's, I think, our Western culture. It's often very pushy. Like in school, you have to do well in all your subjects, you have to get these kind of grades, and then you have to go to this kind of school, and then you have to go to university, and you have, there's a lot of, from our parents sometimes, from society, we tend to feel a lot of pressure to do well, to accomplish a lot in our life. And so then if we have that kind of idea or that kind of attitude of, I have to do well, then when we come to spiritual practice, we bring that same attitude, I have to do really, really well in my practice and get to the result really fast. So that kind of attitude doesn't work, and it can be counterproductive. It can actually create more problems, more obstacles than helping you. So it's important to recognize that. It's important to see that kind of attitude of, I want to be free of my afflictions quickly, is not helpful. So one saying that the Tibetans have, which I found helpful, they say that because according to Buddhism, our mind has been existing a long time. It didn't just start in this life with our birth, but it existed before. In other lives, we've had many, many past lives. I know that's difficult to accept, but this is the Buddhist view. And in our past lives, we had all of these afflictions. So our mind is very familiar with them. Like, you know, they are long-term habits. They didn't just start in this life. They were with our mind in our past lives as well. And so that's one reason why it takes so much time to overcome them. You know, they're very long-term habits. And when it comes to positive states of mind, like love, compassion, wisdom, patience, our mind is not so familiar with those. So those are kind of weaker. So the negative states of mind are stronger, and the positive states of mind are weaker. So that's kind of our situation. And so when it comes to trying to change our mind, it's naturally difficult. So the saying, the sort of phrase they say is trying to cultivate positive states of mind is like trying to push a boulder up a hill. And when it comes to the negative states of mind, that's like rolling a boulder down the hill. And so that shows that, you know, the Tibetans who had these teachings in their culture for many centuries, more than 1,000 years, they're quite familiar with meditation, with the mind, and they know how difficult it is to change the mind. And so they just accept that, and they don't get stressed about it. Because getting stressed doesn't help. That's not going to help. That's not going to make it easier. So we need to have an attitude of patience, but that doesn't mean being lazy. Yeah. We need to practice, you know, keep practicing little by little, slowly, slowly. And if we do that, like a little bit every day, then slowly we'll see our mind is changing, improving. Yeah. So it's definitely possible to change the mind. I can say that from my experience. My mind is much better than it was in the past when I first started. More positive states of mind, fewer negative states of mind. So it's definitely possible to do that. But pushing yourself, feeling stressed and anxious when you notice negative states of mind isn't helpful. And also a problem I had, and I think many people also have this, is attitudes of like self-criticalness, self-loathing, self-hatred, like a little voice inside that's criticizing yourself, scolding yourself. Yeah? Does anyone notice that? This is very common, a very Western habit. The Tibetans don't seem to have that problem. There was a conference of some Western Buddhist teachers, many of whom were also therapists, psychologists, and they had this conference with the Dalai Lama. And they were discussing different things about, you know, teaching Buddhism, teaching meditation. And one of the teachers from America gave a talk about how when teaching meditation on loving kindness, when this is a traditional Buddhist practice, metta, they call it metta in Pali, loving kindness, where you generate this feeling of love and then you spread it to many, many people, many beings. So this teacher said, when teaching that in America, she said, you have to teach people to have love for themselves, because Most people don't. Or no, I don't know if she said that, but many people don't know how to love themselves. And apparently when the Dalai Lama heard this, actually she said, many people hate themselves. Many Western people hate themselves. And so you have to teach people how to love themselves. So when the Dalai Lama heard this, he was like, what? He didn't understand, this idea of hating yourself, hating oneself. And so he said, is that true? There are people who hate themselves? And then he asked the people in the room, how many of you have this problem? And almost everybody put up their hand. So he was like surprised that this would occur, that people would hate themselves. It's like an unknown phenomenon in Tibetan culture. And so, so since that time, he often talks about how important it is to have love for yourself, have compassion for yourself, and so on. But traditionally, in traditional Buddhist teachings, at least in Tibet, that they didn't talk about that. It wasn't necessary. People already had good feelings about themselves. They need to be taught how to have love for themselves. So, so this is really important, that if we do have thoughts, feelings of hatred, criticalness towards ourselves, that we recognize that's happening, and then work on changing that. Because this is a problem I had, but I didn't realize it. I had a lot of self-hatred, but it took me years before I even recognized it. And again, like if there's something going on in our mind that's unhealthy, problematic, creating suffering, and we don't see it, we don't recognize it, then it just keeps happening. So it's really important to recognize these unhealthy, unhelpful attitudes. Then we can change them. So I think what you're talking about is kind of an unhealthy way, an unhealthy and unhelpful approach, to get unhappy and stressed when noticing some negative states of mind. So maybe you can just say to yourself, yes, it's good that we recognize, it's good that you can recognize anger and want to be free of anger. That's fantastic. But you have to accept that it will take time to do that. You can't do it right away. And one of the things I love about Buddhism is that it has a lot of methods, tools for changing the mind. Because in my background, I was Catholic. I'm sure many of you as well. I grew up in a Catholic family, and we went to church, and I went to Catholic school, and so there's similar ideas in Catholicism, that you shouldn't be angry, you shouldn't be selfish, you shouldn't be greedy, right? All these, and we should be like the saints, right? We should have just good thoughts and good feelings and be a good person like the saints. So there's that kind of idea. And when I was a little girl, I wanted to be like the saints. Yeah, I wanted to be a saint. But then I found I wasn't. I couldn't. I was, I had a lot of anger, a lot of selfishness, and I had all these kind of bad qualities. But there was no kind of explanation on how to change yourself, how to be like the saints, how to be more patient, how to be more good. And so I just felt very frustrated. And then when I started learning Buddhism, and they teach all these methods. Oh, if you have anger, you can do this, you can do that, you can do many, many different tools, methods for changing those negative states of mind. And so, so if you learn those, then you notice anger in your mind, then you look at those methods and work with those methods to bring about changes in your mind. So that's a much better approach than just getting upset and frustrated and stressed, right? Like, okay, there's anger in the mind. What can I do about it? How can I change it? And then you work on changing it, and you may not work right away, but sooner or later, eventually, you'll notice your mind is changing and that anger becomes less. Does that make sense? Yeah. Mm. And actually, I mean, one kind of simple method, we'll talk about this more later, is the whole idea of impermanence, meaning that our body, our mind, and all the things around us are impermanent. And impermanence in Buddhism means changing all the time. Like every moment, every second, every nanosecond, in the tiniest fraction of time, things are changing. So this is the reality of things. Buddha saw it and talked about it, and he said it's really important to contemplate impermanence, become aware of impermanence. And this is itself a very helpful way of dealing with emotions like anger. Anger is impermanent. Yeah, it's not always there in our mind. It comes and goes. Yeah, sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. So just recognizing that and remembering that, reminding yourself. So, okay, anger comes up in my mind, and I can say, oh, there's anger, but it won't last. It will go away. It'll change. And so then you're sort of more relaxed. So, oh, anger, terrible. So sometimes just remembering that it's impermanent you'll be able to let go of it. It'll pass. Yeah. So that can be very helpful. And you can use that with any of the disturbing emotions. Same with attachment, with jealousy. I mean, there are other methods. So if impermanence doesn't work, you can try something else. But often, just to remind yourself that it is impermanent. Like clouds, a good example is the clouds in the sky. Yeah? They come and they go. They're not permanent. So if you see a cloud and you say, I don't like that cloud. That cloud's ugly. Well, don't get fussed about it. It's going to disappear. That's the nature of clouds. They don't last. They change, they pass, they disappear. And similar with all the things in our mind, our thoughts, our emotions, they're like clouds. They come and they go. They're not permanent. So sometimes just remembering that, waiting a few moments or a few minutes, sometimes it'll just disappear. So that it might sound easy, but it usually takes time to understand that and be able to use it. But very helpful. Okay, so let's. There was an online. Online. But is it related to what we're talking about?
It was from after the first session. Someone asked the question here. Está en español, te la digo y se la traduces. Según se ha dicho, parece que la traducción más exacta del concepto pali y sánscrito al español es retentiva. Sin embargo, he escuchado diversas traducciones para este mismo concepto. Desconozco si en inglés hay el mismo problema o es una cuestión más del español. Retentiva mental. Atención, que también es memoria. Atención plena, atención consciente. ¿Podemos interpretar todos esos términos como sinónimos? ¿Hay alguno más adecuado? Y se podría matizar la diferencia entre atención retentiva, concentración y presencia.
Long question? You got all that?
It's a tiny question. No, but it's basically about the different words in the translation of mindfulness. Because in Spanish we have just said few different words. Retentiva. I think the main thing there could be like the difference between mindfulness in terms of attention as a mental factor or mindfulness as a recollection. So he says that the question says that if all these different terms that we use, from recollection to attention, they are synonymous. If we can use them indistinctively, or if they are like which will be the most precise one? This is one part of the question, because then la última parte es la diferencia entre esos cuatro elementos.
Sí.
Yes. And he's asking the question is asking if in English there is the same debate like we have in Spanish, and difficulty of finding a single word to really comprehend the whole meaning of mindfulness or sati.
Yeah, I mean, I think most translations use mindfulness, but I have also seen recollection instead of mindfulness. And it's a little tricky to use the term attention because there's another mental factor that's translated as attention. Yeah. So, yeah, it's always just difficult when you're translating from Pali or Tibetan into English or Spanish to try to find the right word. And different translators have their own opinions about which word is... Yeah, it's complicated.
Ahora no hay traducción simultánea este proceso porque estamos hablando. Sí, ya. Tenemos como el mismo debate en inglés. El término original de sati se traduce la mayor parte de las veces como mindfulness, pero en ocasiones también directamente como en castellano sería recuerdo o retentiva. Y es difícil encontrar un único término, una única palabra que abarque todo el significado del término original. Y usarlo de atención en ocasiones puede ser tiene un puntito difícil, porque hay otro factor mental que es la atención tal cual. Por eso aquí mindfulness nunca es atención y ya está, es atención consciente. Para diferenciarlo de otro factor mental, de otra cualidad mental, que es la mera atención. Tiene un componente más de conciencia o de presencia. Bueno, la segunda parte de la pregunta era la diferencia entre atención,
retentiva, concentración y presencia.
Attention, this sense of recollection,
sí. Concentración,
concentration and presence. Which will be the difference between these four terms: attention, recollection, concentration, and to be present or present?
Well, again, it might just be different translators choosing different terms, but all going back to the same Pali term or Sanskrit term and Tibetan term.
Puede que se trate también de diferentes criterios de traducción. Diferentes traductores o traductoras pues utilizan en base a sus criterios diferentes términos, pero todos en cualquier caso hacen referencia al mismo término original que hemos mencionado en Pali como Shakti. Y que cuyos aspectos hemos estado explicando, aunque no seamos capaces de condensarlos todos en una única palabra.
So, for many people who really want to follow this path, then it's good to study scriptures, the traditional scriptures, have a good teacher, reliable teacher who's studied and understands. And so go back to the original scriptures and try to understand how these different mental states are explained in the scriptures, rather than worrying so much about what words are used to translate them.
Sí, para cualquiera que quiera profundizar en esta práctica sería recurrir a textos originales o a textos tradicionales y a las explicaciones que alguien cualificado te pueda dar, más que centrarse para comprender realmente el significado y la extensión del término, más que centrarse en con qué palabras se ha traducido este término original, ¿no? Ir un poco a la fuente y profundizar a partir de ahí. Para una vez comprendes bien el concepto, va a importar menos el término que se utilice en la traducción.
And I myself had difficulty at some point with not so much the word mindfulness, but the way it was explained. Like, what is mindfulness? There's many different explanations of it. And so that kind of got me frustrated for a while. And then finally I realized, well, there are different ways that term is used, different ways of explaining it, different ways of experiencing it. So even within Buddhism, mindfulness doesn't always mean exactly the same thing.
Incluso a mí me ha resultado un poco conflictivo no tanto el término como la forma de explicar ese término. Si estamos hablando de atención consciente, que es el que hemos utilizado en estas diapositivas, mindfulness, yo tenía problemas para comprender o aceptar las diferentes explicaciones que describían el término, hasta que me di cuenta de que aun cuando el término puede estar claro, sencillamente se explica desde determinadas maneras, o dependiendo del contexto se puede enfatizar un aspecto u otro. Incluso dentro del ámbito budista se explica el término con diferentes descripciones dependiendo del contexto. Una vez se entiende eso, se puede comprender mejor.
And I haven't learned everything there is about Buddhism. I'm still in the process of learning things about Buddhism, so I don't have all the answers.
Bueno, tampoco es que yo conozca todo el budismo, estoy aprendiendo budismo, estoy en mi proceso de aprendizaje y por eso tampoco tengo todas las respuestas.
Yeah, so it's quite deep and complex.
Es un tema profundo y complejo.
So let's carry on, and maybe some of these questions will get answered. So the next slide, if you could turn that on again. So the next slide is about the role that mindfulness plays in the path that leads to freedom from suffering, enlightenment. So in an earlier slide, I talked about the three higher trainings. Do you remember what those were? Anyone remember? 3 higher trainings? Ethics, concentration, sabiduría. Okay. So yeah. So mindfulness plays a role in each of these 3 higher trainings. So those 3 higher trainings, if we want to be free of suffering, we want to reach enlightenment, we need to practice all 3 of those. And mindfulness is important for all 3. It's the next. Yeah. Okay. So what role mindfulness plays in these 3? So with the first one is ethics. And so when it comes to ethics, we need to remember what we should practice, virtue, good things, good karma, and what we should avoid, non-virtue. So I mentioned earlier, ethics mainly means avoiding harmful actions with our body and our speech and our mind. And so we need to remember what we have learned about that. Like, for example, killing. That's the first main action the Buddha said was non-virtuous, was harmful, because every being values their life. No being wants to die. And that isn't just human beings, but animals and insects, birds. They also don't want to die. And if we kill them, then that causes a lot of suffering. They really suffer when they are killed. And so if we don't want to cause suffering to others, then we try to avoid killing, but also ourselves. We don't want to suffer. If we kill, we are creating negative karma, bad karma that will bring suffering in the future. Like we ourselves may be killed. May not happen in this lifetime, but maybe in another lifetime we will find ourselves experiencing suffering as a result of killing. So if we don't want ourselves to suffer, we should also refrain from killing. So that's one example of something to avoid. And then the opposite of killing is to live with respect for life, respecting the life of living beings and trying to help them, take care of them when they need help, protecting their lives. So, I mean, there's actually lots of opportunities to do that. When you find an insect, for example, that's fallen into some water, trying to get out, you can help it get out. Or if there's an animal in the road and there's a car coming, something that might harm them, you can move it out of the road. So protecting life is the opposite of killing. So that's one example. And so mindfulness involves remembering what is virtuous, what is non-virtuous, so that we can try to do what is virtuous and avoid what is non-virtuous. So keeping that in mind, not forgetting that, enables us to practice ethics. And then for the second training is concentration. And that involves training our mind to stay focused, concentrated on an object that we choose, like the breath, or there's different objects you could use to develop concentration. Like one common practice is visualizing an image of the Buddha and then concentrating on that, using that as your object of concentration. So to develop concentration, mindfulness is needed to remember your object, not forget your object. So if your mind wanders away, then you realize, oh, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do. You bring your mind back to your object. So that's the role played by mindfulness. So it's an essential practice for developing concentration. And then for the third, wisdom. So wisdom, to develop wisdom, we need to use analysis, investigation, to understand the actual way that things exist. So one example is what I just talked about earlier, impermanence. So our bodies, our minds, and all the things around us are impermanent, meaning they are changing. all the time, every moment, every second, they are changing. And as things change, they degenerate and eventually die or fall apart or whatever. They're not going to last forever. And so that's not easy to understand. It's not obvious, because we look at a wall, for example, and it looks like, you know, it's there and it's solid and it's going to last forever. But in reality, it's made of, you know, molecules and atoms and, you know, tiny particles that are moving and changing all the time. And with time, it degenerates. Yeah, that's just the nature. So it may take a long time to degenerate and eventually fall apart, but eventually, sooner or later, that's what's going to happen. It's not going to last forever. And so impermanence really helps us to overcome attachment. Because when we like something, we want it to last. We want it to be there forever. Never change, never go away, right? That's what we want. But that's just not the way things are, right? Nothing is going to last forever. Things are subject to change, and eventually they're going to fall apart. And so if we have this understanding of impermanence, that will help us to not have such attachment and then be unhappy and upset when something does fall apart. Like you buy a new pair of shoes, and you really like those shoes, you know, especially when they're new, right? They look so nice when they're brand new, just out of the box. And maybe you want them to look like that forever, right? But even if you clean them, you polish them, you take good care of them, yeah, they're going to change. You know, they're going to start to wear out and get dirty and get scratched and holes in them, right? So if you understand that right from the beginning, you know, that they are going to change, they're not always going to look the way they did when you first bought them, then you won't be unhappy or upset when these changes happen. You'll just accept it. Of course, most people will think, well, never mind, I'll just throw them away and get a new pair. But when it comes to people or pets, then it's a different thing. You know, we also want, you know, our beloved family members and friends and pets, we want them to be there forever, to last forever and not get old, and not change, not die. And we can't really replace them like we can replace a pair of shoes. So once they're gone, that's it. But, you know, that's a cause of a huge amount of suffering when we do lose a loved one or a pet. And if we remember impermanence, if we just remind ourselves of impermanence and understand impermanence, that will help us to be less upset, to have less suffering when this beloved person changes, gets old, and then dies. We'll be able to accept it better and not, I mean, some people, when they lose a loved one, they just fall apart, right? They just have so much grief, so much sadness, and sometimes they die as well quite soon after their loved one, because they just feel, I can't live anymore without that person. If that person isn't here, I don't want to be here either. And sometimes they take their own life, they commit suicide, or they just become so unhappy that it affects their health and they get sick and die, right? That happens sometimes. So that's a result of not accepting impermanence. Whereas if we do understand impermanence, we'll avoid those kind of sufferings, those kind of problems. And we can still love people. Of course, we love people, we care for them, but we can accept when it's time for them to go and not be so upset. So that's just one example of wisdom, understanding impermanence. So it takes some time to contemplate impermanence and come to an understanding of it. So while we are working on developing our understanding of impermanence, we need to be able to keep our mind focused on an object. Like, for example, a body. We're going to talk about that more later. Like our own body or the body of someone else. We need to be able to focus on that body and contemplate how it's made of parts, and all those parts are also made of parts down to the tiniest particles, like the molecules and atoms. And it's changing every moment, changing, doesn't stay the same from one moment to the next. So we can come to that understanding and wisdom, that's like a wisdom, understanding the impermanent nature of the body. But we need to keep our mind focused on that object while we're analyzing it and trying to understand it. Because if our mind keeps running away, thinking about other things, then we won't be able to gain that wisdom. So that's the role played by mindfulness in cultivating wisdom. So having looked at those, so this is just giving you some idea of how important mindfulness is in practicing those 3 higher trainings, and those in turn are the main practices we need to do to become free of suffering and the causes of suffering. So there's a lot more that could be said about that, but because we're limited in time, we will now move on to the main topic of this weekend, which is the 4 establishments of mindfulness. Oh, and we're almost out of time. Okay, so we'll just do a brief introduction to these 4 establishments of mindfulness. And so, as I mentioned already, these are practices found in the 2 main traditions of Buddhism. One is called, the Sanskrit term is Hinayana, and a nice translation of that is the fundamental vehicle. And then Mahayana, which is here translated as the universal vehicle. So those are the 2 main traditions of Buddhism. And so I'm just trying to emphasize that all vehicles, all traditions of Buddhism have these 4 establishments of mindfulness. Because some people don't know that they are also within the Mahayana. You hear a lot about the 4 establishments of mindfulness in the fundamental vehicle, like in Thailand, Burma, and so on. But you don't hear so much about it in the Mahayana. And the Dalai Lama has said that he feels kind of sad that not many people in the Mahayana tradition, like the Tibetan tradition, know about these 4 and are practicing these 4. And he's really encouraging us to learn about them and practice them in our tradition. Okay, so then when we're talking about this particular type of mindfulness, here it's translated as foundations of mindfulness, yeah. And then Pali, that's satipatthana, translated as foundations of mindfulness or establishments of mindfulness. So this is a particular way of using mindfulness. And the purpose of these four is to gain wisdom, to gain insight into the nature of our body and our mind and all phenomena. And if we gain this wisdom into how these things exist, then that will enable us to free ourselves from the afflictions, the negative states of mind that are the cause of suffering. That's the purpose of these four. So there's four objects that are used, that we develop mindfulness of. Body, and when we were looking at this before, somebody commented that it's kind of strange that it says it's in plural, corpus, instead of just one. Sometimes they just use plural, singular, body. But there's many bodies. We have our own body, but there's also the bodies of others. And so when you fully practice mindfulness, the foundation of mindfulness with regard to the body, the purpose is to understand the nature of bodies, not just your own body, but the bodies of others as well. And we tend to have a lot of attachment to bodies. We're attached to our own body, and we also get attached to the bodies of others. And that can lead to sexual desire and romantic feelings, and also unhappiness when a body that we're attached to changes and gets old and dies. Then that creates a lot of suffering, as I just mentioned. And so that suffering is unnecessary. It's like unnecessary suffering. It is based on attachment, because we don't see bodies as they really are. So the point is to understand the nature of bodies, how they actually exist, and that will enable us to avoid a lot of suffering. And it's good to start with bodies as the first object, because bodies are physical. We can see them with our eyes, we can touch them, so they're more, it's an easier object to understand compared with the three other objects. Second is feelings, and when we use that term in Buddhism, it's not talking about all the different kinds of emotions that we have, right? But there's just three types of feelings, and we have one of these every moment, every single moment of our experience. We have one of these three types of feelings. The three types of feelings are pleasant feeling, feeling good, unpleasant feeling, not feeling good, and then sometimes it's called neutral or indifferent, and that's neither pleasant nor unpleasant, just kind of in between. So with every single moment, with every single experience, we have one of these three types of feelings. So, for example, if you like flowers, most people like flowers, right? That's why we give flowers to people as like a nice gift. So there's some really beautiful flowers here, nice and fresh. So when looking at the flowers, then we might have a pleasant feeling, right? You have a pleasant feeling looking at the flowers? Okay. So there's a lot of things, and the beautiful scenery around here in this place, looking up at the mountain, looking up at the sky and the trees. So then maybe a pleasant feeling. So we can have pleasant feelings when we see something attractive, or when we hear some nice sound, like a music that we like. When we hear that music, we probably have a pleasant feeling. And with our sense of smell, when we smell something nice, some type of food we like to eat, we smell that, we probably have a pleasant feeling. And then when we actually taste that delicious food, it's in our mouth, then we probably have a pleasant feeling. And with our body, physical sensations, if we're comfortable, not too hot, not too cold, not feeling any pain, then that's probably a pleasant feeling. Yeah. Or if you're cold, you do feel cold, and then you go outside and sit in the sun, and the sun is shining on you, and you feel nice and warm. That's probably a pleasant feeling. So we have 5 senses: seeing, hearing, smelling, taste, and bodily sensations. So we can have a pleasant feeling with any of the 5 senses. Then there's unpleasant feelings. We know those too. So when we look at something ugly, like after a few days, these flowers are going to look ugly, and we'll probably have an unpleasant feeling, and they probably will smell bad too. So yeah, unpleasant feelings from looking at something, or smelling something, and hearing certain sounds that we find unpleasant. Like this morning, I heard these motorcycles going around. For me, that's an unpleasant sound, a sound that I feel unpleasant about, like, and this nice, beautiful, quiet mountain place, these motorcycles going, 200 miles an hour or something. So I had an unpleasant feeling with that sound. And then with our body, if there's pain, if there's discomfort, we're hungry, we're cold, and unpleasant feeling. So yeah, all the time. I'm just trying to, we are having either an unpleasant feeling or a pleasant feeling. Sometimes there's just a neutral feeling. And it's maybe a little hard to find an example of a neutral feeling, but I think, when looking at a wall, looking at a completely plain wall, and there's no decoration, and, the color isn't really nice or unpleasant, so maybe we have a neutral feeling of that. So anyway, that's another of the objects of mindfulness. So becoming aware of our feelings, and we'll talk more later about why that's important, why we need to be aware of our feelings. And then third is mind. And again, it can look a little strange to have it in plural, minds. But according to Buddhism, we have mind, but our mind is always changing. It's impermanent. Every moment, every second, we have different states of mind, different experiences. They come and they go, they come and they go. So we actually have multiple minds, multiple states of mind, not just one mind that's always the same. So we have to become aware of our mind, but also in the practice, the full practice of mindfulness, we also become aware of the minds of others. And in the beginning, that isn't easy to do because we don't have clairvoyance. We can't see the minds of others, but we can get some idea. Like you look at people's faces, right? You can kind of tell if they're happy or unhappy or angry, right? So we can kind of guess by facial expressions, body language. We can sort of get an idea of what's going on in another person's mind. So we also develop the practice with regard to the minds of others. And then finally, the fourth is phenomena. And that basically includes everything that isn't in the first three. So whatever's left over. So there's different practices for each of these four. And because we have limited time, I'm going to mainly focus on the first two, mainly on the first one, bodies. And we'll look at different kinds of practices, different meditations related to these. So I've already gone over time for this session. We'll stop here and then continue after lunch. But yeah, the basic point is doing practices related to mindfulness of these four objects in order to overcome confusion, ignorance, wrong ideas, wrong understandings we have with regard to these objects, which lead to suffering. For example, if we don't understand impermanence and instead we think things are permanent, that leads to a lot of suffering. Like when I was answering the question earlier about anger, you know, if we see anger in our mind and we think, oh, anger, it's permanent, it's going to be there forever, then we get really, you know, stressed and unhappy, worried. But if we realize, no, it's not permanent, it's not going to be there forever, it's impermanent. It's impermanent, it's going to go away. Then that itself can help us relax and not be so stressed. So that's just one example of how if we misunderstand or we have mistaken ideas with regard to these four things, they lead to suffering, they lead to problems. So we're trying to clear up those wrong ideas and come to see things as they are. And then that will enable us eventually to become free of suffering and the causes of suffering. So that's purpose of these four. Okay, so any important question you want to ask before we stop here? You can't wait till after lunch. Yeah?
Just an example of phenomenon, a quick one.
An example of phenomenon. Well, one example would be the Four Noble Truths. That's something that isn't a body, it isn't feelings, isn't minds. I mean, it's, yeah, maybe that's not a good example. The wall. Okay, the wall. Or a computer or a phone. Okay, so those are things that don't fit in the first three. No, yeah, it's just all the other things, not in the first three. But there'll be time later for questions as well. So let's stop here for now, and let's just take a moment to make a mental dedication of the positive energy. We call it merit in Buddhism. When we do something positive, something virtuous, we create merit, just like good energy, good karma, the cause of happiness and spiritual growth. So we've just spent a couple hours looking at these teachings, doing a little bit of meditation on them, and we had a good motivation for what we're doing, and so that means we've created merit, good karma, and that's the cause of happiness. But let's share this with others, wishing that it will bring benefit, peace, happiness to other beings, other people, beings, and to the world. May it help bring about greater peace and happiness and freedom from suffering.